The bosses in Elden Ring Nightreign can vary quite a bit on difficulty. Some of them can at first glance appear to be quite difficult, only to figure out that later on actually they're not that bad once you learn out their gimmick. A lot of these bosses are going to be kind of like gimmicky bosses where they have like a knowledge skill check, and once you understand how certain mechanics work, they actually can be a lot easier. Some of them are very difficult though, and we'll get into those and how best you can beat them. Let's talk about how to deal with these bosses. I'll start at the beginning and then work my way down the list and talk about what each boss does in terms of their moveset, in terms of their weaknesses, and how you should go about doing this, as well as your team composition if you're playing with others, and what you should bring with you into the battle. So without further ado, let's start things off with the first boss. This one is also going to be the easiest one. It is going to be at the round table referred to as Tricephalos. However, it is going to be in game called Gladius, Beast of the Night. This one is going to be a three-headed dog, kind of like a Cerberus, and it is going to be fairly easy in terms of the attack patterns. You're going to see a little effective icon next to the boss, and this is going to tell you what type of element the boss is going to be weak against. This one is going to be holy damage, so make sure that when you are out exploring, you keep a lookout for holy damage, and you are typically going to end up seeing weapons that are going to have the boss's weakness throughout your expedition. If you look at the locations on the map, it will tell you where you can expect to find weapons that are going to have certain affinities. So if you just open up your map, you will be able to tell where items might be that might have that affinity. Otherwise, take a look out for shopkeepers. They may end up selling weapons that have this affinity, but if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world in this boss. It's not a very difficult boss, so you don't absolutely need to have this. The boss's moveset are going to be fairly well telegraphed and fairly simple. It's going to start off with a three-headed dog, and this dog is going to have a number of different attacks. Typically, it's going to be jumping back and biting towards you. You're going to see a lot of lunges towards the character. It usually has a bit of a wind-up, so you can tell that it's coming. It also is going to have a kind of fire breath where it is going to pull its head back. You're going to see flames coming out of its mouth, and then it's going to blast forward a wave of fire. Make sure you dodge out of the way for that one. You're also going to notice that it is going to have a chain and a sword on its back, and this is going to come with a number of different combinations where you're going to see it swinging the chain around as like a kind of sweeping attack. This one is going to be a little bit of a delayed attack at times, so you may have to hold off on your dodge for a second or two while it winds up. You're also going to see a sword. Sometimes the sword is going to come as its own separate attack, where it's going to kind of grab the sword in its mouth and lunge towards you with a massive fiery explosion. This one is going to, you need to either dodge or even sprint out of the way when you see it coming. Otherwise, you're also going to see a combination of the two, where sometimes it does end up swinging the chain around, only to finish off with a sword lunge into the ground, which has a little bit of AoE damage. Once you damage the boss down to a certain amount, you will see the boss will enter a new phase where it will split up into three separate dogs, and each dog will have some fairly basic attacks. It's mostly going to just end up being lunges and bites, as well as potentially some fire breaths. So very similar to the first dog. It's less threatening individually, but because there's three of them, obviously you do have to keep your eye out for more potential threats. Once you damage the boss down further, it is going to regain its full three-headed form, and then it's then going to resume its attacks from the first phase, and that is pretty much going to sum up this boss's moveset. It's not a very difficult boss. As long as you are level 12 and above, you shouldn't have too much difficulty, especially playing with three people. This one won't be too tough. Just make sure that, again, if you are having some difficulties, make sure that you do end up bringing weapons that have holy damage, since that will often end up stunning the boss if you do enough hits with it, which will give you a lot of attack windows to do extra damage to it. So next up on the list is going to be Gaping Jaw. This one is also going to be known as Adele, Baron of the Night, and you are going to then come across this on your second expedition. This is going to be like a giant dinosaur-like creature. The movesets are fairly well predictable, and also doesn't really have that many gimmicks. It's a fairly straightforward fight. It is going to be weak to poison, so make sure that if you can, you bring some poison weapons into the fight. If you do have poison damage, you are going to be able to potentially stun this boss more frequently, which is going to make it a whole lot easier. This boss is going to be quite considerably more difficult than the first boss, as it is going to have some very aggressive movesets. So speaking of the movesets, what this boss is going to typically be doing, it's going to be divided into two phases. The first phase is going to be a lot easier than the second. The first phase, you're going to see quite a bit of lunging attacks where the boss is going to kind of jump towards you or smash its head on the ground and then charge towards you. Make sure that you do end up jumping out of the way when you see this, especially when it smashes its head into the ground and then dashes towards you, because if you do end up getting caught in its jaws, it is going to potentially eat you, and this is going to do a lot of damage. This can easily one-shot you if you're not at full HP or don't have a lot of HP to begin with, so watch out for that attack. It's mostly going to be a combination of jumping around and dashing towards you with its head. It's nothing too crazy. It is going to be a fairly quick moveset though, so you're going to have to be on your toes. But where things get very dangerous is when it gets to the second phase. You're going to notice this when you get to the halfway mark. You're going to see a giant purple cloud with like electricity. When you see this, run far away, because it's going to do a massive AoE attack, which can very easily one-shot you. So just run away when you see this. And how the boss is going to change after this is you are going to see that's going to be glowing purple. It's going to kind of have explosive purple bursts when it does end up doing its regular moveset. It's mostly going to do the same moveset, but you're going to see that when it does things like jumping and dashing, but behind it and around it, you are going to see some explosives, and this this is going to make it a little bit more dangerous when trying to hit it from behind, since these explosions can obviously trigger a little bit in an AoE blast. It is also noteworthy that attack that you saw in the triggering of the second phase will be able to be repeated, so just watch out for that. If you ever see the boss kind of hovering around and a glowing purple mist forming, just run away, because that is going to be able to do a lot of damage. The other major difference in the second phase is you will notice that the ground will start having like kind of like blackened streaks. Make sure you avoid those streaks, because it is signaling that there is going to be an explosion on those areas. The closer you are to the boss, the more dangerous, and the further back, the gap between those streaks will obviously widen, so you'll have a little bit more safety there. So just make sure you look out on the ground, since it is going to have kind of some of these explosive ground attacks. Other than that, this boss is a fairly straightforward boss. There isn't really that many gimmicks other than the kind of transition between the first and second phase. Just make sure that you are aware of its dashes, and you shouldn't have too much difficulty with this one. Moving on now to the third boss you're going to face. This one's going to be Sentient Pest, or otherwise known as the Wisdom of the Night. This is going to be kind of a double boss. It is going to be a shared health bar, but you are going to be fighting two different entities. Going to be a giant scorpion as well as a giant moth. Now this boss, you're really going to want to make sure your team composition here is going to be 1 or 2 ranged characters, preferably I and a melee character or 2. So how I like to do is I like to split the groups up. Melee characters focus on the scorpion, whereas ranged characters focus on the moth. And the reason why I like to do it this way is because the moth has a couple of attacks which are going to be fairly annoying if you aren't watching the moth. And if you have a ranged character aggroing the moth or dealing with the moth separately, then the melee characters can focus on the scorpion without having to worry about what the moth is doing behind them. So what the scorpion is going to do is the scorpion typically is going to end up having pretty basic attacks. It's fairly slow as well. It's mostly going to revolve around some ground slams with its legs, which is going to cause like the earth to kind of like shatter around you, which will do some speed damage. However, these attacks have a fairly big wind up. You're going to see it shifting its body weight before it ends up slamming the ground, so you do have time to dodge, and it's also going to give you pretty big windows where you can attack it, so it's not too dangerous. It also does some occasional lunges, but other than that, the scorpion is fairly slow and you shouldn't have too difficult of a time putting damage into it. However, the moth is going to be a little bit more dynamic in the fact that it is going to end up shooting some laser beams at you. This is going to be a combination of mostly forward firing lasers, as well as some that are going to go straight up into the air and then kind of rain down laser beams on you. So just watch out for those. And this is why I like to have a ranged character dealing with the moth separately, because if you're busy fighting the scorpion and everyone's focusing on the scorpion together, you might not end up seeing where the moth is or what it's doing, and you might end up getting shot in the back from the moth, which is going to make things a lot trickier. That's why if you have a ranged character or 2 focusing the moth, they can keep the moth's aggro, and the melee character or melee characters can focus on the scorpion. It's also important to note that with this fight, the scorpion is going to, when it takes a certain amount of damage, it's going to enter like a cocoon state or a chrysalis state. You'll see it will start becoming like white and kind of like a hardened rock. At this phase, you probably don't want to be damaging the scorpion anymore. It's going to almost negate most of your damage, so it's not really worth attacking. And then you're going to focus your efforts onto the moth for the time being. After a while, the scorpion will wake back up and you can continue damaging the scorpion and the moth same as before. And also watch out for the moth. Another attack that also is going to have is it will end up shooting out kind of like a cloud of toxic poison. So if you don't want to get poisoned, obviously stay away from that when you do end up seeing it. It's not too difficult to dodge. Just make sure that you do stay away from it, because this poison will add up quite quickly if you stand in it for too long. Now, once you enter the second phase, you will notice the scorpion and the moth will kind of join forces, and the moth will, in a very weird fashion, start riding the scorpion, and you will see the moth and the scorpion will kind of both be one being, where they will combine their attacks. Their attacks are mostly the same as before. Nothing changes too much here other than the fact that they are going to be joined up. There is going to be one new attack, however. The moth will start having an attack where you will see like a beam of light on the ground, and you want to get away from that as quickly as possible, because soon after, a giant laser beam will start firing at the ground. This will be a continuous stream of light, and this will do quite a bit of damage in a fairly big radius. This is going to last for several seconds, so you're going to want to make sure you stay clear of those when you see that. Other than that, the move sets are going to be typically the same. However, you do need to make sure that you are ready for this fight. It's going to be a fairly long one. This boss does have a fair amount of HP, so it might take a while. It is also going to be weak against fire damage, so if you want to be able to stun the bosses and make the fight a lot easier, keep an eye out for fire weapons. You can potentially add fire ailments to your weapons using relics in your loadout screen. Otherwise, this boss is going to be a fairly straightforward boss. There's nothing too gimmicky here. It is going to be a pretty tanky boss, but other than the high HP pool, it's not too difficult. So long as you have a character on your team that's going to have a ranged character, this shouldn't be too bad. Now, at the halfway mark, you're going to be facing off against our Ogre, otherwise known as Maris Fathom of the Night. This is going to be a fairly unique boss. It's actually a very majestic boss and one of my favorite bosses just because of it looks really cool. It is going to be kind of like a giant spectral whale that you'll end up facing. This one is going to be a bit of a gimmick boss though. It's not very difficult. As a matter of fact, once you know how it works, it's actually a very easy boss. But if you don't know how it works, it actually is a very difficult boss. So it's pretty much just a knowledge check. So let's talk about how to approach this boss. It is going to have a lot of sleeping attacks. So if possible, make sure you do end up bringing relics that are going to give you some kind of sleep resistance, because this boss is going to try put you to sleep quite a bit. And that's not to say the boss fight is boring. It's a very unique boss fight, but it is going to literally put you to sleep in the game. It's also going to be weak against holy damage. So if you can try find weapons that are going to have the holy damage ailment on them, this will help out a lot. You can probably find those in your expedition. Otherwise, this boss is going to be mostly a flying boss. So it is going to spend the majority of its time in the air, and it's going to make it very difficult to actually hit if you are playing as a melee build. So you really got to want to make sure that at least one, if not two members of your team are going to be ranged characters. Things like the sorcerer or the archer are going to be ideal here because it is going to make it a lot easier to do damage against it. Now, the whale itself is going to have some interesting movesets, but there are going to be one or two that are quite a threat, and if you don't deal with them, you could end up having a squad wipe situation, which will end your run. So the whale is mostly going to kind of attack with some waves. You're going to see the whale is going to fire off these like oceanic waves at you. All you got to do is roll out of the way. It's got very lenient dodge windows on this as well, so it's not too difficult to dodge. The whale is also at times going to kind of dart towards you. You just got to jump out the way. Again, fairly straightforward, very big wind up time. You can very clearly see this coming. It's not too difficult to dodge. Every now and then the boss is also going to kind of like fire off these explosive jellyfish at you. I just found that it was just easiest to kind of just walk or roll away, and it wasn't too much of a problem. Every now and then the whale will also kind of like spawn these giant tentacles in the ground. These can be a little bit annoying. You can kill them by just attacking them and they will end up just dying out, but otherwise you could also just ignore them. Just watch out when you roll and move, because if you walk into them, obviously they're going to hit you, and that can be a little bit of an annoyance at most. Then what you really have to watch out for is when the whale ends up laying these kind of explosive eggs. They are literally tactical nukes, and the eggs can be damaged. If you do end up destroying the egg, it won't blow up, but if you fail to damage the egg in time, it's going to set off a massive explosion, which will be able to one-shot you. So just kind of run away, run very far away. It's got a huge area of effect, so you need to get very far away to avoid this. And now one of the most dangerous attacks of the boss is going to be the sleep attack. Boss itself is going to start sleeping. It's going to lay down to sleep, and when it does this, it's going to very quickly fill up the sleep gouge on you and your allies, and this is going to do a massive amount of damage, which is capable of one-shotting. It doesn't always one-shot. If you have a full HP and you got a big HP bar, it won't one-shot you, but it will do a massive amount of damage and probably take out like 90% of your health. And the way you can avoid this is going to be pretty much either run towards the boss while it's sleeping, or while you see it laying down to sleep, it'll usually have an animation where it will kind of slowly hover down towards the ground and then go into a sleeping state, which will give you time to react. You have to get to the boss quickly, do as much damage as you can to stun it to prevent the sleep. Or the best way I found of using this is keeping one of your character ults available for when this attack does happen. Don't just spam your ult every time you get a chance to use it, but instead when you see it doing this specific attack or this specific animation, use your ult, then that'll stun it and cancel out the animation, because if you don't, it is going to end up doing a massive amount of damage, which is going to either one-shot you or drain all your health, and that's going to also lead to some big problems. Otherwise, this boss is fairly simple. As long as you have a ranged character or two, and as long as one of your allies are keeping their ult to cancel out the sleeping attack, it should be a fairly straightforward boss battle. It's not too difficult. It's more of a gimmick boss, so don't worry. Just make sure that you follow those instructions. So next up on the list is going to be the Equilibrious Beast. This is going to be the fifth boss you will encounter, otherwise known as Libra Creature of the Night. This is going to be the first of the difficult bosses in the game. This is where things are going to get a lot tougher, and for the first thing you need to note about this boss, it is going to be weak against madness damage. It's also going to be dishing out a ton of madness damage as well, so it's weak against its own element. So if you can, make sure that you do end up bringing a relic or two that is going to allow you to be more resistant against madness, and also keep an eye out, because there is going to be at least one location on the map that is going to have the madness icon, which means that if you go to this location when you're out exploring, you will have a decent chance of finding a madness weapon which can help out the boss. Otherwise, keep an eye out on the shopkeeper, because madness damage here is actually going to be quite important against the boss, since if you do have a weapon that does madness damage, it will actually be able to periodically stun the Equilibrious Beast, and this is going to be quite valuable because it is going to help out a lot with the battle. So the first thing you're going to note is that when you enter the battle, you're going to see this creature that is going to be holding a scale, and it's going to offer you a deal. Now these deals are typically going to range from things like give you a powerful weapon. It's not going to give you a legendary weapon, it's going to give you a purple weapon from my experience. It can give you maximum levels, so it can take you all the way to level 15, or it can increase the amount of flasks you have. It basically is going to give you a wide variety of buffs, but be careful with this deal, because if you take this deal, it is going to be a two-edged blade, since you are going to have a big downside with this deal. A downside that is pretty much going to be more severe than the reward you're going to get. Basically what happens is if you take the deal, every time you use a health flask, you will lose a level. So unless you're in a very desperate state and you have come to this boss fight completely unprepared, you are pretty much going to want to decline this deal. Now, when we get into the fight, let's talk about the moveset that you're going to be noticing. The Equilibrious Beast is going to have a very wide variety of moves. It is going to be difficult to get attacks in, since it is going to be very frequent. Its moveset doesn't very often give you time to actually deal damage to it. So that is why I emphasize the importance of trying to find a weapon that does madness damage. Getting those stuns in are going to be quite valuable. So what the Equilibrious Beast is going to typically do is its most basic attack is going to take its staff and it's going to kind of jump around the battlefield while swinging its staff at you. That is going to be what it's going to do very often. However, that is going to be the most basic attack, and that is going to be the one you have the least to worry about. What you do have to worry about though is all the sources of madness damage that's going to be throwing your way, because if you do take enough madness damage, you will see a gouge that will fill up, and if that fills up, you're going to take a huge amount of damage, which is very often going to be able to one-shot you. To mitigate this, you're going to see that the Equilibrious Beast is going to periodically drop these kind of like yellow crystals on the ground. If you run over these crystals, you will kind of deplete a bit of your madness meter. So if you do feel your meter filling up too quickly, try collect some of these to kind of empty out your meter and restart the clock, so to speak. The Equilibrious Beast is also going to form these kind of circle patterns on the ground, and if you do end up seeing them, try avoid them, since it is going to cause an explosion there, which will do some AoE damage. So make sure that you do end up stepping outside of those circles. Whenever you see them, it's going to appear very frequently throughout the battlefield, and that is going to mean that you're going to constantly be needing to move around. Otherwise, you're going to take some big damage from that. So make sure that you're always moving around. The Equilibrious Beast will also sometimes spawn these symbols in front of it, where these projectiles will fire forwards out of this symbol in the air. So make sure that you do end up just stepping out of the way of that. It is going to be firing straight forward, so it's pretty easy to just step out of the way and dodge that. Every now and then, the Equilibrious Beast is also going to kind of stuff its hands into the ground, and it's going to cause a massive AoE explosion. You're going to want to try get as far back as you can quickly. It's also going to have another big AoE attack where it's going to put both hands in the air, and this is going to do a similar attack where it's going to kind of rain down madness damage, and you're also going to want to try step back and get out of the way. It's got a very similar kind of radius to the one I just mentioned in the ground. So if you see it sticking both hands into the air or the ground, just try get back quickly, since it is going to do a big AoE damage attack. Now, one of the more dangerous and kind of gimmicky attacks that it is going to have is it's going to kind of go into a meditative state where it's going to have a shield around it. Now, you have two options here. One, you can either stun the Equilibrious Beast, and you can do this by kind of using an ultimate ability on the Equilibrious Beast while it is in this state, or you can just sprint towards these icons that are going to be hovering all around it. They're going to be kind of like these glowing shields, and if you sprint towards them, they will shatter. If you run through enough of them, it will end up stunning the Equilibrious Beast, which will also open up a little bit of a window where you can attack it. Now, this is going to get periodically harder and harder each time it does this, and eventually it's going to start spawning them in the air, meaning you won't be able to sprint through them, and that'll make it a lot more challenging to deal with. That's why I like to make sure that you and your allies, one of you at least, brings a ranged character such as Eye or a sorceress, so you can shoot these shields when they're in the air, because if you can't reach them, it is going to be a big problem, because if you do not destroy them fast enough, the Equilibrious Beast is going to do a massive AoE attack, and as far as I can tell, no matter how far away you are, this will fill up your madness gouge and potentially one-shot you. So you're going to want to make sure that you destroy these shields every time you see the Equilibrious Beast enter this meditative state. Now, another attack that the Equilibrious Beast is going to be making use of is where it's going to kind of throw these like yellow balls into the sky, and these are going to detonate and kind of rain down some projectiles, which are going to be capable of doing a decent amount of damage. So you're going to want to make sure you avoid that by just staying a little bit away from where you see these floating balls. And then you're also going to want to keep an eye out for one of the more dangerous attacks that the Equilibrious Beast can do. It's very rare that I see this one, but it does happen at least once every run, where he kind of starts taking his staff and he starts slamming into the ground repeatedly, and this turns the whole battlefield yellow, and this is going to very quickly fill up your madness counter and potentially squad wipe everyone on the battlefield. I went down a couple of times this one. The only way you can really stop it is if you try use an ultimate attack at this point to try stun it, or maybe if you or your allies have a weapon that does madness damage, you can potentially try strike it down and stun it while it's in this state. This is why it's so important to have a weapon that does madness damage, because you are able to stun it and open up some windows to attack it. The Equilibrious Beast will also start having this weird shimmering effect where you will see these yellow shimmers around its body, and this will indicate that it has been successfully stunned by the madness damage, and this will make the fight a whole lot easier. So if you can get your hands on a weapon that does madness damage, make sure you bring it to this fight. The more of these weapons you bring, the easier the fight will be. Trust me, this one is going to be a hard one without it. So next up on this list, we're going to have Dark Drift Knight, otherwise known as Fulgor, champion of the Nightglow. This one is probably going to be one of the most difficult bosses in Nightreign. I've seen a lot of people have the opinion this is the most difficult, if not the second most difficult. It is going to be a very tough fight, so buckle up. This one is going to require you to be at your best, and this one is also going to be weak against holy damage. So if possible, try find weapons that have holy damage. This will make the fight a significant amount easier, because it's actually very difficult to get hits on this boss. Unless you are able to parry it or deflect, it is going to be a bit of a difficult one to get hits on, since this boss is going to be moving around a lot. So make sure if possible you do bring some weapons with that are going to do holy damage. This will help stun Fulgor if you are able to do enough damage with the holy weapon, and that will give you and your allies some windows to attack it. You'll also see that Fulgor will have this kind of like sparking effect around him. This will indicate that he has been stunned by a holy weapon, and this will make the fight significantly easier if possible. Now, talking about his moveset, he is not going to have that many different moves, but his moves that he does have in combination together are going to be extremely difficult to dodge, and it's going to be a very chaotic experience with explosions and with dashes and dives and lunges pretty much happening everywhere. And it's going to make it very difficult to keep track of what's going on, and it's going to make it even more difficult to damage Fulgor, considering how much things you have to try dodge and be aware of during the battle. So Fulgor is going to have a kind of like a spear which he's going to swing around, and this is going to be accompanied by lunges and slams into the ground. That's going to be pretty standard. You know, most bosses are going to use attacks like this. He's going to kind of just jump around, dashing, charging towards you. Fairly simple to dodge on its own, not too difficult. Every now and then Fulgor is also going to kind of charge around the battlefield before also charging towards you at a very fast speed, so just make sure you roll out of the way for that one. Again, not very difficult to dodge on its own because it is very well telegraphed. But the problem comes in where Fulgor starts using some of his other effects, which are going to make things a lot more difficult. You're going to see one of these effects when he does take his sword and he kind of smash it into the ground with like a yellow glow around the sword. Once he stabs the ground with this, you're going to see these kind of like fissures opening up all around the ground, where you're going to see yellow swords kind of penetrating through the ground and stabbing upwards. This is going to be very difficult to dodge, since there are going to be lots of them just appearing everywhere all over the ground, and it's also going to make it even more difficult considering that while this is happening, Fulgor is going to kind of resume his dashes and dives and charges, so you're going to have to not only watch out for him, but you're also going to need to watch out for the ground, because if you do end up stepping on one of these and not getting out of the way, you're going to take a lot of damage here, so you're going to want to make sure you keep your eye on the ground at all times. Then Fulgor is going to have another big AoE attack where he's going to kind of make the ground start glowing orange or yellow, and when this happens, you're going to have a very brief window to dodge, because if you don't, it's going to explode, and this is going to be quite difficult because the timing is a little bit awkward, since it does glow for a second or two and then it explodes, and it's going to glow again for a second or two and then it's going to explode, and sometimes it's kind of pulsates at very frequent manners, and you're going to have to dodge and roll out of these since they are going to do big damage. And at the same time, you're also going to have to watch out for Fulgor, because while this happens, he's also going to be dashing and diving and charging towards you and swinging his spear towards you as well, so you're going to have to watch out for both elements, since that is going to make things a lot more complicated. If you do manage to get Fulgor's health yourself down to the halfway mark, you're going to unlock the second phase where things are going to get even more crazy, because Fulgor is going to do all the things I just spoke about, but on top of that, he's also going to kind of regrow his missing arm, like a kind of long, dark, twisted version of it, which he is then going to incorporate into his fighting, where he's going to start doing wide sweeping attacks with this arm. And this can sometimes be simple one-hit combos, and sometimes this is going to go on for several sweeps and slams, where the final one is going to smash into the ground and do big AoE damage. So you're going to have to kind of time your dodges. You're going to have to learn the timings of this, because there isn't any real easy way out of it. It's just going to be a tricky one, and you're going to have to memorize it. Otherwise, you're going to have to incorporate, like I said, the holy damage, which can help stun him and make this fight a lot easier, because this is going to be difficult considering he's going to have various different combos. Some of them are going to be one-hit combos, some of them are going to be two-hit combos. The timings are going to change between them, and it is going to be difficult to dodge out of all of them. Not only that, but again, considering the fact that he has now regrown this arm, and he's going to be doing these massive wide sweeping attacks with these slams into the ground, which is going to do big AoE damage. In addition to this, he's also going to be able to manipulate the terrain and do his typical attacks we mentioned in phase 1, and that's going to make things very difficult to keep track of. It's a very chaotic fight, but again, bring weapons that are going to do holy damage will make it a whole lot easier. Then coming in at the second last on our list, we're going to have Fish of the Fog, otherwise known as Caligo Miasma of the Night. This is going to be a big dragon boss, and this one is also going to be a frost dragon. So if you can, one way to make this battle easier, if you can, bring some relics that are going to help mitigate frost buildup or frost damage, as this boss is going to be making use of a lot of frost attacks, and you are going to have a little bit of a difficult time with all the frost ailments. If possible, bring some ways to mitigate that. Otherwise, also speaking of this boss and its ailments, this boss is weak against fire, so if you have a weapon that does fire damage, which is not too difficult to come by, this will make this boss a lot easier. Or the boss fight itself isn't that difficult. It's not really a full gimmick boss. It has a few gimmicks, but it's not a gimmick boss, but it also has a bit of real attacks. It's a fairly slow boss. None of the attacks are very threatening. You are able to dodge them for the most part. It's not going to be like a crazy boss with a whole bunch of things going on. It's fairly straightforward attacks. So let's talk about these attacks and what they are all going to do. The boss itself is going to be a dragon, so it is at times going to kind of go into the air, but I did find that for the most part the boss is going to be on the ground, so you don't really need a ranged character for this boss, despite the fact that it is a dragon. It is going to spend about, say, 90% of the time on the ground, so melee characters will do just fine here. But if you do want to bring an archer or a sorceress, that is also fine. It's just you don't need them for this boss battle. The boss itself is going to use a lot of different frost attacks. As we mentioned earlier, one of the frost attacks it's going to bring is going to be some ice breaths. Now, there are going to be different types of ice breaths. There is going to be a standard kind of left to right or right to left panning. The easiest way to deal with this is just dodge in the opposite direction of the breath, or you could just try get it close to it, and if you can, be underneath the dragon. This will help allow you to avoid the ice breaths altogether. It is also going to have a attack where it's going to kind of jump backwards and blast frost forwards. This is going to be pretty standard from amongst all the dragon types in the game. The boss can stand up on its back legs and also use its frost breath by shooting straight down. This will be able to damage if you're trying to hide under its legs. Although I did find that most of the time being underneath the legs is going to be the safest bet, since most of their attacks is not going to be dealing with you under its legs. Not going to really do any kind of stomping as much as some of the other dragons, so you are going to be fairly safe most of the time while you are under the legs, and that's going to be a nice way to avoid damage. The boss itself does do some attacks where it will stomp the ground every now and then. It's quite rare. It will typically indicate this, but it's not going to use its individual legs to stomp up and down like the typical dragons are going to do. The boss itself will also at times kind of stand up on its back legs, where it will start growling into the air, and this will indicate that it's time for you to run away, because you will start seeing like a snowy mist build up around it, and this is going to then cause some big AoE damage. So if you do see the boss kind of standing up and growling, you are going to want to kind of put a little bit of distance between you and it, because it is going to be a big AoE attack. Now, talking about some of the boss's gimmicks, this boss is going to, at times you will see the arena will become very foggy and it'll be very difficult to see quite far in front of you. The boss will do one of two things. Either there will be these giant ice boulders that will form. You need to hide behind them away from the direction of the boss, because there is going to be a massive AoE attack. And if you don't hide behind these ice crystals, you're going to take some damage. So you have to figure out which direction the boss is, and also which where these ice crystals are to hide behind them. The other gimmick attack the boss will have is where we'll do a very similar thing, but this time instead of spawning ice crystals, you will kind of hear like a crackling noise, and this will indicate the boss is actually out somewhere in the arena and it's freezing the sky. The best way to deal with this is going to be find the boss as quickly as you can and try stun it. You can do this by either using your fire weapons to damage it, or you can try save your ultimate here and do damage against the boss while it is in the state, and this will stun it, preventing this attack. Otherwise, if you don't stun it, what the boss is going to end up doing is this is going to, like I said, freeze the sky, and then it's going to kind of drop the sky down on your head. So basically you are Chicken Little in this battle, as you are going to get flattened by this. It won't do enough damage to one-shot you. It does do a fairly big amount of damage, but it won't be enough to one-shot you, so you don't have to worry that it is going to be a squad wipe situation if you don't end up dealing with it. However, you will want to try deal with it if possible to try save you some health. Then the boss is also going to have some more interesting attacks where one of them is going to fire an ice breath in a kind of like 360-degree angle around itself. And this is going to also form ice crystals on the ground, where the boss will end up also kind of doing this sweeping tail attack, which will detonate those ice crystals around it. You're also going to notice the boss will periodically spawn these ice crystals on the ground. What that is going to do is it's going to kind of make it a little bit difficult to maneuver the battlefield, because if you stand on these ice crystals, they will contribute towards your frost buildup. If you do fill up your frost gauge, what is going to end up happening is any damage you take is going to be significantly increased while this gauge is filled. The boss itself also has another very interesting attack where it's going to kind of basically transform itself into a B2 bomber, and it's going to fly up into the air and kind of carpet bomb the arena with these ice crystals. The best way to avoid this is kind of just sidestep, just try get out of its line of bombing, and that should allow you some safety from that, but it is going to do this periodically. Just keep in mind when it takes off from the ground that attack is coming. Other than that, the boss also is going to have some basic attacks where it's going to use its tail to do a sweeping attack towards you. You can notice this when this tail lights up and starts glowing. It's about to do that attack. It's a pretty easy one to dodge. It's also very early telegraph, so you got time to react to it. This boss isn't that difficult, but you do have to watch out for the ice breaths. The ice breaths are going to be the majority of where its attacks and damages are going to come from. Just make sure you recognize which ice breath is going to be attacked. Some of them you can avoid by standing underneath it. Some of them you're going to have to avoid by running away from it. So you're going to have to kind of figure out which one is coming. But otherwise, making sure that you have relics that are going to mitigate frost buildup and having weapons that are going to do fire damage should make this boss fight a lot easier. Although the boss fight already is fairly easy, so I wouldn't worry that much about it. It's not going to be required, but it will help out a bit if you are struggling. So let's take a look at the final boss on the list. This is going to be Night Aspect, or otherwise Shape of Night. This is going to be the first and only full two-phase boss on the list. When I say two full phases, I mean it has two individual health bars, so that's going to make it a little bit tougher, as we are going to see this boss is going to be weak against holy damage once again. So if possible, and I can't emphasize this enough, this boss fight is going to be significantly easier if one of your teammates, or a couple of your teammates would be even better, have holy damage. And as always, you can find holy damage weapons by looking at the map. If you see any locations with the holy icon ailment, make sure you visit them and try see if you can find any holy weapons there. This can make the boss fight significantly easier, because if you do enough damage with holy weapons to the boss, it will temporarily stun them, and this will give you and your allies windows to attack the boss in, and that'll make it a lot easier, because this boss is going to move around a ton, making it a little bit difficult to land hits, especially when you have to account for all the things going on the screen, which is going to make getting hits on it quite difficult. So let's talk about the boss and its moveset. It is going to have a couple of things you need to watch out for. The first thing is you're going to notice when you enter the boss arena, you're going to see the boss is going to be kind of slowly dragging its sword along the battlefield. It's going to be kind of aimlessly walking towards you. If you go closer, you will end up initiating the fight, and the boss is going to be, the first phase, fairly straightforward. He's going to start off with just one sword. He's going to do mostly just some sweeping attacks as well as some jabs with the sword. It's not too difficult to dodge. It is going to be a fairly low health bar as well. He doesn't have that much HP, especially considering he has two phases. The first health bar is going to go by fairly quickly, so try not to take too much damage here, because this fight is basically just there to try drain you of your resources. When you do damage it to a certain amount, he will end up utilizing more swords, where he will have, I believe it's 3 hands, and all 3 of these hands will be capable of attacking you. It is mostly going to be the same as before. However, it is going to also be with additional swords, so you're going to have to watch out for longer attack patterns from him. But again, this phase is not very difficult. Once you do defeat it though, you are going to get to the second phase, where things are going to become a lot more difficult. Now when you get to the second phase, he's going to start off not being too bad. He's going to typically do mostly same kind of moves he saw in phase 1. Keep an eye out for the boss boss, however, because he does do a couple of other attacks, one of which is going to be where he does end up kneeling on the ground and kind of holding his sword there. Where the arena starts to glow dark, he will start spawning a bunch of meteorites all around you, which will start crashing down to the ground. This one is going to be a bit of a trickier one to dodge. So either run far away from this if possible if you see him doing it, or just keep your eye out for the projectiles and try dodge your way out of them. Then where things get really tricky though is when the boss starts opening up rifts in the sky. You will see he will fly up into the air and he will kind of slice open a rift into another dimension. And this is where things start becoming very chaotic. When this rift is open, you will start seeing the ground will start erupting with various fissures, and you will start seeing also long streaks of kind of like blackened earth. Make sure you avoid those streaks of blackened ground, because that is going to do some big damage if you are standing on them and aren't able to get out of the way. You're also going to see some sparking effects on the ground. This is going to be areas where you want to avoid standing, since that is going to cause damage to you as well. And while this is all happening, the boss is going to continue to jump around, dash towards you with his sword, do some sweeping attacks, as well as some ground slams on occasion. So watch out for that, because there's going to be a lot of things to deal with. If it was just one of these things on its own, it wouldn't be so bad, but when everything is happening together, it becomes a lot to keep track of. This is why you really want to have a holy weapon here, because it's going to be difficult to try get hits on the boss with all these things going on around you, and it is going to make the fight a lot more difficult if you're unable to stun him. If you have a holy weapon, you might be able to get a stun in every now and then, but I would recommend keeping at least one of your allies and their ultimate ability for when you see the boss fly up into the air and kind of hold his sword up into the sky. You will start to see it glowing. He will end up doing a massive AoE attack where he slams the ground with the sword and cause a huge explosive radius. So if possible, this is where you want to have one of your ultimates available to try stun him out of the air to prevent that attack from going forward. The best one to make use of for this, I find, is going to typically be Iron Eye. His arrow will be able to stun the boss and disrupt it. If you don't have Iron Eye, you're going to have to try get close to him, as some other characters like Wilder can also do it, but you have to be a bit closer in order to do so, which will make it a little bit more difficult in order to disrupt it. This is probably going to be the most dangerous attack of the boss, because it's going to do a massive amount of damage, and this is capable of potentially squad wiping you if your HP isn't full, and you do need to keep an eye out for this. This is why I like to save at least one of your character's ultimates for when this does end up happening. Once you end up beating the boss, you will unlock the final cutscene. I won't spoil too much of that, and that will be the end of the game if you have managed to take down all of these bosses. Anyway, I hope this video helped you. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section below if there's any other hints towards any of these bosses that I might have left out. Maybe you can help someone else out who might be stuck on one of these bosses. Otherwise, I'll see you again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.